The sports you love, the teams you can't live without.
Get a sense of urgency!
This is Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, big thanks to BT for jumping on with us in the last segment, talking PGA Championship. Our coverage of the PGA Championship this week, all week, is brought to you by You Win a Golf, serving Utah's golfers since 1971. I want to also remind you of the Hercules Hero of the Week. Nominate the youth sports volunteer you know for the Hercules Hero of the Week. Submit your nomination at kslsports.com/contests. And listen every Thursday afternoon to JJ and Alex for the winner. Help us celebrate the efforts of those volunteers making an impact with Hercules Hero of the Week, sponsored by Hercules Credit Union. Joining the show now, he covers the Cougs for KSLSports.com, and he joins us on Fridays. He's our buddy Mitch Harper. What's up, Mitch?
Yeah, guys, happy to be on here in St. George. Boys are getting ready for a basketball tournament, so happy to be on.
Mitch, speaking of basketball, what do you think the likelihood is? Because I don't know if Jaxson Robinson did enough at the Combine to guarantee himself getting drafted. If he does withdraw from the NBA draft, what are the odds he ends up back at BYU?
I'd say the odds wouldn't be in favor of BYU. He's got Kentucky and Kansas as options, and they're going to pay a lot of money potentially to get someone like Jaxson Robinson. And Jaxson Robinson said at the end of the season that, he wouldn't be where he's at today without Mark Pope. He said that at the end of the NCAA tournament. So there's a strong relationship there with Mark Pope. But, Kevin Young's got the ability to sell BYU and, how he envisions Jaxson Robinson. And he's, made it clear that Kevin Young has that he wants BYU to be one of the best programs to prepare players for the NBA, and that's what Jaxson Robinson's going for. But I would say that BYU, is in the mix, and I wouldn't bet against Kevin Young, but I would say that Kentucky and Kansas would be the options that would probably be more the favorites in this right now.
Speaking of Kevin Young, even the great Adrian Wojnarowski is loving him up, huh?
He was, yeah. Watching the Combine, and just kind of gave him praise on that hire, and that BYU got a good coach, and it'll be interesting to see how Kevin Young works out at BYU. All BYU basketball coaches, really, you look back over the last 70, 80 years, they've all been good. The only one that hasn't had at least 3 NCAA tournament appearances was Mark Pope, and he would have had 3 had COVID not taken away his first year. So they've had the consistency of always getting good coaches at BYU despite their limited coaching pool. And Kevin Young's probably got one of the best resumes that BYU has ever hired for a head coach as far as praise and like his experience level. BYU typically gets up and comers in whatever sport they're hiring for their head coach. And, Kevin Young's got a lot of experience in professional basketball. We'll see how it translates to college basketball in the Big 12, but definitely a well-respected name, particularly in NBA circles.
I was surprised to see Noah Waterman throw his name to the transfer portal. He's pretty critical, and it seemed like Kevin Young was about keeping players in BYU, so I can't imagine he's getting run off. But am I wrong? Am I misreading that situation?
No, he's not getting ran off, and the portal, BYU having their extension to May 12th. They had 11 extra days than the typical deadline because of Mark Pope's coaching change. So with no Waterman, when this era of negotiations and maybe tampering, teams they need to fill out their rosters, and maybe there's a financial opportunity that's more lucrative than what he can currently have. Who knows? I mean, he hasn't publicly, he's kind of taken the Dallin Hall approach where I think he's keeping all of his options open as far as, not definitively saying goodbye to BYU. But, Louisville's been a program that's been rumored to be in the mix for Noah Waterman. And, BYU's got to get at least at least 2 or 3 guys to get a 10, 11 man rotation, and I think if they can do that, that'll be fine for BYU in year one with Kevin Young. So, but yeah, it was a little bit of a surprise because Waterman was someone that was, seemed like he was in on BYU, and then things changed going into the final deadline of the transfer portal.
All right, Mitch, the list continues on. We've got 26 to 50 released this week, and we'll get the final is next week, right? 1 to 25. Awesome.
That's right.
I'm curious, in this particular batch, who was the hardest to place?
Probably Ziggy Ansah, and
I thought you'd say that. That's interesting. I thought you'd say that because I thought. Sorry, Mitch, to interrupt you, but I was like, "Ooh, I bet that was hard."
Yes, because as far as just an individual talent, there's very few, if any, that compare to his ability as a defensive end. I mean, he is just kind of a one of one in BYU history, and he probably would not have played had Ethan Manumaleuna not got hurt. That's what's remarkable about his story is that his talent and really kind of greatness for that one season would not have been realized had there not been an injury in front of him. But I just think that talent was just undeniable, and it's among the elites in BYU football history. And again, that's where this list I felt is different than your typical ranking of best players that lean solely on maybe stats or maybe just clocking in, clocking out every single day for 4 consecutive years. And like even if you only started 9 games, that talent was undeniable at BYU, and his impact. It was a reason why BYU had the 3rd best defense in college football that year, behind only Alabama and Notre Dame, and those 2 teams played in the national title. So, Ziggy was definitely tricky, and I placed him at 30, and I think a lot of people might think that could be too high, but I think it's a fair spot because it speaks to his level of talent.
Well, one of the interesting things on this list is you have Fred Warner at 35. And Fred's turned into the best linebacker in the NFL, and so I think naturally people will assume, well, he should be a top 10 player because he might end up being a top 10 legacy player over at BYU as far as what he does at the next level. Who has a bigger name based on, I guess, reputation that's on this list versus what they actually produced while at BYU now that you've kind of addressed the Ziggy Ansah situation?
Fred Warner could definitely be in that group. There's probably, I think that would be a good candidate because, Warner, he made an impact right away as a freshman, and he was dang good at BYU. I mean, he ended up his senior year playing a little bit of safety, and it was kind of this hybrid role in that terrible 2017 season. But his best football has been by far and away in the NFL. I don't think anyone realized how much he had to offer at the pro level when he was leaving BYU. He was considering leaving after his junior year, and people thought that was crazy that he was considering it because no one looked at him after his junior year as an NFL prospect at that time. So, I think Fred Warner would be someone that could be kind of fit that billing a little bit. You go back and last week I had Eric Drage was someone who was kind of synonymous with the glory years of BYU football and was left as the all-time leading receiver. And, I think people felt that was a little bit low because, again, he kind of embodied the golden era. But this is an overall makeup of, elite athletes, elite talents, and plus the production, plus the, everything that goes kind of into it. And, but no, it's been a fun list to put together, and BYU's had some really good players that make this debate really fun.
Man, I can't wait to find out if Ben Criddle was top 10 or top 5. The mongoose.
He got left off the list. I can spoil that one.
Also receiving votes, the Criddler.
He was
Mitch.
in the others receiving votes category.
Mitch, we have to see him occasionally.
I know.
Oh,
I talked to Ben yesterday, in fact, and nope. I probably should let him know that he's not going to be on the list.
I love the Criddler. Mitch, thank you. As always, we appreciate you, and enjoy St. George.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Good luck
See you,
to your
buddy.
boys playing hoops.
Man, that's quite the racket for St. George. They host a lot of youth sports stuff, which whoever came up with that move down there, that was pretty savvy.
Well, yeah, you're not getting anyone up to Burley, Idaho for a tournament in early or late spring even.
Totally.
It's too cold.
It makes a ton of sense.
But people are like, yeah, I could get away for a weekend.
Bounce down to St. George?
Absolutely.
I mean, I've had the pleasure on a return, one of my many return trips from Las Vegas, Ben. Have you ever stopped and tried to get lunch in St. George when it's lunchtime and there's a youth sports event in town, which is often?
Never.
Bananas. Yeah. It's bananas.
I believe it.
Which is good. Which is great. It's a perfect place for it. That's awesome. Good for Mitch. What do you think? Ziggy Ansah in the 20s?
It's high. Again, the first time we really started talking about Ziggy was at the Combine.
That's not true. He had a great year.
He had a big year.
He had a great year.
But then he went to the Combine, or did he even go to the Senior Bowl first? And people are like, no, not just a good year. Like, we're talking a top 5 draft pick. Like, he exploded.
But to say that we weren't talking about him before,
you're right.
that is not correct.
He was good, but he became first-round NFL draft pick after he left BYU.
We talked about him day one when he got on campus because he was Caleb Lohner. Not like he was coming from basketball, but that he didn't have a football background and all that stuff.
The list of BYU players that we talk about,
I hear you, but
Mo Longy, et cetera. Like, there is always a guy that we're like, maybe this is the great BYU hope.
We were aware of his existence.
Sure.
Anyway.
But we have 30 guys like that. There's a guy like that every year that could be the next guy. It just so
just
happened that
mentioned one.
Ziggy...
Caleb Lohner, yeah.
Right. It just so happened that Ziggy became the guy, actually followed through. But the idea that we talked about him and built him up to be what he turned out to be as far as a draft pick, not even as an NFL player, but as a draft pick, I think that got a little exaggerated.
I was the one on the air saying, what's the matter with Bronco? He's got Reggie White on his bench. Like, it's one of those where, you heard Mitch talk about it, where Ziggy gets on the field and all of a sudden he's ripping quarterbacks' heads off. And it's like, this guy, it took an injury for this guy. No offense to the late, great LaVell Edwards, but like, he was looking for a quarterback forever. Mm-hmm. I think he played the backup punter at quarterback. And then all of a sudden, Brandon Doman, who had been trying to move to safety for years, gets on the field and is just tearing it up.
Cam Rising.
Cam Rising, yeah, it's crazy.
Can you recruit over the top of Cam Rising?
And then, Broncos at the draft and all this stuff and taking a victory lap. And it's like, you tried not to play that guy. You did your best to not be there, actually.
Yeah.
But, coaches make mistakes.
I mean, Ziggy had 4.5 sacks his final year at BYU. Let's not pretend like he was Nate Orchard out there.
Well, that was a historic season. But, yeah,
right,
I get your point.
Absolutely, but it's not like it was talking about Ziggy Ansah like Reggie White, exactly like you're talking about,
Well, he never got the chance.
Sure, but again, so for him to be coming in at this high on this list, and I'm not questioning Mitch's authority on this list of BYU players. I assure you it's far better than mine.
But he had 12.5 sacks or career. Let's see. He had 62 tackles, 12.5 sacks, 4.5 sacks. Mitch needs to fix that. 9 pass breakups and 6 quarterback hurries. So is it 12.5 or 4.5? I bet it's 12.5 for his career.
I have his
maybe that's
sports
12,
reference page pulled up right
12
now.
12.5 TFLs maybe.
I would believe that. But this says, if sports reference is correct, which generally they are an authority on these things, they've got him as a career 4.5 sacks. 13 tackles for loss.
Okay, so that's what the 12.5 is then.
Yeah.
We should tell Mitch to edit that. 12.5 TFLs, 4.5 sacks.
Yeah.
That makes more sense. Still, why would you play that guy? Top 10 pick. Not good enough for this team.
Yeah.
All right, stay tuned. We'll have more coming up next. Thanks to Mitch for jumping on with us. Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Whether it's the Jazz, Utes, Cougars, or Aggies, these guys have got you covered.
Time to eat, fellas.
You're locked on to Jake Scott and Ben Anderson.
1, 2, 3, move it.
On 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Know that you feel me somehow. You're the closest to heaven that I'll ever be.
Did you really tell the locker room staffer in Denver you were going to be back for
Hell
game
yeah. They know I was in there. Yeah, I told them. I said, I'll see y'all for game 7.
Some of those things are kind of funny. Calling your shot, that type of thing. Like, didn't Doc Rivers leave something in the ceiling of the...
Got $100 from every player and put it in the ceiling.
For when they won the title or something
when they were
like
going to come back to L.A. to win the title.
By the way, it's want to remind you about Win Ticket Wednesday, your chance to win big every week on the KSL Sports Zone. Listen all day on Wednesdays for your chance to win. I just wonder how many of those that didn't come true that we never hear about.
I think there's like $40,000 like the Bills left in the mid-'90s.
How many? Because we heard one about Donovan Mitchell once, right, where he said, "We're not coming back
Donovan
here."
Donovan walking out of OKC
when
they blew that 20-point lead, saying, "We're not coming back here."
So
and
how many times has somebody been like, "I'll see you for Game 7," and then they lose in Game 6.
Every
nobody
Game
ever
5
talks about
that's
it.
ever existed.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
we always hear about the ones that come true. We never hear about the ones. We'll be back, bro.
Well, the NBA, look, we were just talking that nobody's bigger than the sport. But the NBA needs a young superstar who's exciting on and off the floor. And Anthony Edwards could have been created in a machine for the NBA because he looks like Jordan on and off the court. He's vivacious. He's really exciting. He says funny things. He's relatively unproblematic. He's had some issues with texts that have come out. But, everyone moved on, and it wasn't this crazy scandal.
You know what, though, is he is an example of something that we all here in Utah and other places like it try to ignore, but he doesn't get any attention because he's in Minnesota. And it's sad that that's still a thing, and I know the world is becoming a smaller place, and that's not as much of a thing.
But when next year's ESPN and Amazon and NBC schedule comes out, how many Minnesota games are going to be on versus how many Nets games are going to be on, and Lakers games. Lakers is a much better example.
And listen, I bag on national media because for the most part, I cannot stand it. I cannot stand it. And part of the reason I cannot stand it is because they do nothing but talk about New York and L.A. all day, every day. Mm-hmm. Oh, and throw in the Cowboys.
Yeah.
And then if anywhere else in the country, I mean, it's so frustrating to me, but it is true. And I don't think Anthony Edwards gets near the face of the leagueness that you're talking about because nobody cares about Minnesota. And that sucks. And it's not all about the market or the market size, and some small market teams can be more interesting than others, but Minnesota in particular ain't it. Like if he were a Minnesota Wild player, maybe he'd be getting more attention. Or even a Twin.
Yeah.
But a Minnesota Timberwolf, they just don't move even when they're good, apparently.
Yeah.
They just don't move the needle. And I think that's really unfortunate. But I almost caught myself saying, well, he needs to get to a different market before he could do what you're talking about, Ben. Well, and I hate that that's true, but I think it is true.
Well, regardless of whether you say it or not, or whether it is true. If he wants to get that type of attention, you've got to go play in a bigger market because we've dealt with it.
But it might not just be bigger. It'd be just more important.
Regardless, that will be the conversation about him in the next 24 months. Regardless of whether you say it or not, that is what is going to unfold in the NBA media because the national media does a pretty bad job with the NBA outside of Charles Barkley and, inside the NBA.
It's terrible.
It has a really, really poor general representation. And I think there are good media members. I mean, Zach Lowe is incredible. He understands the game. He's got a ton of nuance. He doesn't do that. He's not a sucker for it. He does some great work. Kevin Pelton does some great work. They're both ESPN guys, but they are not even like the stars of the ESPN coverage because they're not that salacious. And for whatever reason, we like the salacious aspect of the NBA more than some of the other leagues.
Oh, it's a soap opera. We love the soap opera about sports in general. Why can people not shut up about Scottie Scheffler? I mean,
sure.
We do.
But to your point, if this were the Minnesota Wild, nobody cares that Sid the Kid's in Pittsburgh his whole life, or Ovechkin's been in D.C., or McDavid's in Edmonton. It's okay in hockey, but hockey doesn't get talked about anyways on a national scale. So you're right. For Ant to take that next step, inevitably the conversation is going to be about him leaving, especially if they lose this year and next year.
And don't get me totally wrong. John and Carl got plenty of attention here. Their reputation for how good they were was very much understood across the entire league. But John and Carl were never the face of the league, ever.
No.
And we're talking about being the face of the league.
Well,
and not the next Michael or LeBron on the floor, because, again, that's not fair, but the next number one on the podium for the NBA. I don't think you can do that in Minnesota. I just don't.
No, I mean, I think we've got evidence of it right now, because who are we not talking about? Nikola Jokic. What's he done? Nothing short of win 3 of the last 4 MVPs and a title last year. And look, Jokic gets a lot of love. Jokic can get the awards because the media will vote for him because he's the best player.
He's not the face of the league.
He's not the face of the league.
No.
He doesn't get the same talk on ESPN the morning after the way even the Lakers do, and LeBron does, and the Warriors do, etc.
Oh.
And we're watching one of the greatest players who's ever suited up in the NBA right now in his prime, and he does not get the same conversation.
I'm going to give you something to notice with national media and Nikola Jokic. And this still happens, and you'll notice it, and it will bug you. The take, and again, it's not as much as it used to be, but the take used to be surprise with Nikola Jokic. Like the take from the national media member is like, no, I'm serious. This guy's really good. Wow, it's just amazing how good this guy is. You'll hear it all the time. They're like, oh my gosh, like they just watched him for the first time yesterday. Like this just in, Nikola Jokic, before he won the MVPs, was really good. We watched it here. We ripped apart Rudy Gobert in the playoffs. What he's doing to Rudy right now is not new.
No.
Is not. It happened years ago. But you'll hear talking heads go, oh my gosh, this guy is really good. The surprise in the voice is so funny.
Yeah.
And you'll get that still about Anthony Edwards, I bet, too, the surprise. Because they're not watching these players, not because they're not special, but because they don't play in New York or L.A., and they don't care about anything else. Because they're not told to care about anything else.
Well, I mean, even the point you're talking about, which I don't want to say you're missing a part of the aspect of it, is that what do they talk about? They talk about Rudy. They still don't even talk about how good Jokic is. They talk about, oh, well, he's doing this to Rudy Gobert.
Yeah.
It's like you're finding the negative angle, not you're watching one of the greatest offensive players who's ever lived. Honestly, maybe the best offensive player we've seen as far as a complete package. 7 feet tall, unbelievable shooter, the best passer I've seen at that size in my life, can bring the ball up the floor. But no, we find the angle of, well, Rudy Gobert is actually not who he says he is.
But you know why we do that? Because he's boring.
Jokic.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's super boring.
Yeah.
Not only is he playing not a glamorous market, but he's also just boring. Like, it's what I like about him. It looks like he's asleep out there, and he's just tearing up the other team.
It's like if Greg Ostertag had superpowers. It's just like, what is going on here?
It's truly what's amazing about him, but it's not exciting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's why people would rank Kobe Bryant over Tim Duncan of like the best player at that era. And it's like,
well, Tim was boring too.
Tim was so boring.
Except for we didn't find reasons to cut Tim down, which is interesting.
No.
I say we, I mean like the
There was
basketball
a
watching
weird
society.
shield of Spursian culture that we've set as this gold standard.
Is it just because they won so much?
Yeah,
but,
yes,
but Jokic is
absolutely.
winning, and I don't remember that from Tim Duncan early in his career either.
No. Not outside of Utah, where people just didn't want to give up that he was better than Karl Malone. But otherwise, yeah. No, I don't think anyone had a problem with that.
That storyline came up annoyingly soon with Tim Duncan. He's like in the league 3 years, and everybody's like, oh, he's already better than Karl.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Jokic is not the face of the league. I don't know who is. The face of the league is still LeBron, which is annoying. But honestly, what did Charles Barkley was complaining about it the other day? Why is everybody talking about the Lakers? They stink.
I mean, every day they would tune in and say, if you watched, the NBA's midday show on ESPN, they would talk about who's going to go farther in the playoffs, the Warriors or the Lakers. The Warriors didn't make it. The Warriors didn't get out of the play-in tournament, right?
No, they did not. They lost the first game.
Yeah, they lost to Sacramento.
That sounds right. Yeah, that's exactly what happened.
So, yeah, I don't know what we're talking about. So, yeah, and then the Lakers got eliminated in 5 games. They've won. I mean, I guess they made the conference finals last year, but, yeah, they had lost, was it 12 in a row to the Nuggets at one point? Again, with Jokic just dominating LeBron. Like, if at the end of Michael's run in 96, 97, 97, 98, that era, there was another guy who had propped up like Tim Duncan. It was like, yeah, he beat Jordan 14 times in a row and eliminated them from the playoffs. I guess there'd be this different conversation, but no, we don't talk about Jokic that way.
You know what? Tim Duncan was never the face of the league either.
No,
and maybe he should have been. To playing into this conversation, is Jokic is the best player, But he's not the face of the league because he's not.
Correct. And I contend that Duncan was the best of that era.
Right. Better than
absolutely
Kobe,
believe that.
but you would say that Kobe was the face
Kobe
of the
was
league
definitely the face.
more so than Tim Duncan ever was.
Well, I mean, there are NBA players. Again, it's why basing NBA players off of, who's the best player in the league. Voting for Kobe is one of the, the debate is LeBron, Michael, and Kobe's getting votes. It's like, come on. Like, he's not in that conversation. He was in that conversation of his era, but not all time. But that's where we are right now. But it is, again, exactly why a guy like Anthony Edwards coming in, backing it up with his play, then having the personality on and off the floor are both really good for the league. Because you have a guy like Jokic who's, for whatever reason, harder to talk about on the national stage when you're trying to sell your product.
Because he doesn't want to be talked.
And he doesn't want to be talked about, and he doesn't provide much fodder.
He doesn't want the attention. Yeah. He's the act in the circus that is just really good at the trapeze, but doesn't really want to be there. Like not putting on a show. Like Bob Dylan, if you've ever seen him perform. It's like, I've seen him perform like 10 times, and I think twice he actually appeared like he wanted to be there.
Yeah.
Every other time it's just like, I'm going to stand up here, and I'm going to croon into the mic, kind of play a little piano, and then call it a day.
I mean, regardless of what happens in this Game 7, let's say the Nuggets win, you're going to get more conversation this offseason about Anthony Edwards than you will about Jokic.
Probably.
On a national scale.
And
by far.
And you won't get near as much conversation about Anthony Edwards as you would about LeBron, which is, again, I don't think he can do it from Minnesota.
No, Anthony Edwards will be...
Giannis couldn't do it from Milwaukee. And
No,
this is all unfortunate truth because you can't do it from Utah either. But I think it is truth.
The nice thing is that you can actually win in those towns now.
Yeah, you can.
You can win, which probably matters more than just having the most famous players. But it is still an issue with the league. You will have more talk about LeBron, Steph, and Jalen Brunson this offseason than you will about either Anthony Edwards or Nikola Jokic.
And how annoying is that?
But
Again, that's all they talk about.
They love having Jalen Brunson right now.
They love Jalen.
Oh, yeah. And the fact he's like a nice guy.
And his dad's a coach.
It's also shockingly boring. He's the most boring guy. Jalen Brunson doesn't say anything exciting either, notoriously. Next game, playing hard. I'll worry about my reputation when I'm retired.
His game isn't boring, though.
No, he's super excited.
Nikola Jokic's game is boring.
Yeah.
Tim Duncan's game was boring.
Yeah.
Again, not like ineffective.
No, very effective, extremely boring.
Extremely boring.
Yeah.
I'm going to make the right pass all the time.
Neither of them dunked a whole lot.
Even when I shoot, it's just going to be kind of casual. I'm going to shoot it. Play below the rim all the time.
Yeah. Watch this box out.
People are going to foul me every time I touch the ball, and I'm not even going to react.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that he has scratches, like cuts all over him all the time?
Always bleeding.
Constantly bleeding. He wouldn't even know it. He doesn't even change his facial expression. But that's how you'd be, too, if you knew your brothers would beat up anybody that messed with you. You ever hung out with a tough guy and feel invincible?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I go out with Hans Olsen all the time.
Seriously.
Did you see them punch fans last week?
That's not cool. Can't do that.
Yeah, don't do that.
Don't do that. Intimidation is...
But also...
be ready to do that.
And don't mess with the Jokic's.
Why would you?
Yeah.
Our friend Kyle Gunther told me that, or told me about that there's something about being the biggest guy in the room that, like, other people want to fight you for some reason. Like, I don't know if it's a proof of...
Their toughness.
Their toughness or something like that, but it's like, no, I'm just big. I'm not here to fight anybody.
I don't want to say nobody's never wanted to fight me. I'm sure there have been people who've wanted to beat me up at the very least, but I've never been a target of a fight. Nor have I ever wanted to fight anyone because I'm not very big.
Except for that bouncer you lipped off to at, or was that DV8?
Lipped off to. You mean I was on the phone talking to my mother?
Oh, dude, you were like Scheffler. I guarantee you had a tude. Going.
I scottied him.
I guarantee you said to that guy, don't you know who I am, pal?
Don't you know who I am?
Come on.
I've got to get back into this show.
Stay tuned. We'll have more coming up next. Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Who's got it better than us? Your home for the best sports coverage in Utah. You're listening to Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Two niggas on the airways, talking sports. They got it made Jaxson on soul. Loves his tie guy, Ben's got style with his scarf. Oh my.
Man, I love this jam. Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. This segment brought to you by Peach Doors and Windows, Utah's premier door and window retailer, combining beauty and technology on doors and windows since 1993. Call them today for your free in-home estimate, 801-566-1255, Peach Doors and Windows. We also want to remind you to get the official debit cards of the Utah Jazz, University of Utah Sports, Real Salt Lake, and more exclusively at America First Credit Union. Maybe we'll have to pen some more jams.
Well, we needed an earworm, and I don't know if we need to overdo it. I've liked the band that you put together.
Very talented.
But we needed a signifier for the show, and I think we've got our first real hit.
I like it. It's good. I think the one about Rock was really good too, but
agreed.
That's about somebody else's show.
Right. It's not about our show. Shout out to Rock, by the way, getting that Bronco Mendenhall scholarship offer last night.
Oh, did he?
Lobos, baby.
Man.
Bronco doesn't recruit, though, so who did that? It had to be Janimal.
Man, that was a good hire for New Mexico.
A+. Absolutely.
Yeah,
I'm totally with you.
He's going to do a good job there. And he likes it there. We were talking about it. He liked it when he came up there under Rocky Long. And when BYU first hired him as defensive coordinator, they really had to work to get him.
I've told you, Bronco's my favorite person I've come across in this line of work.
I liked him, too.
He is so strange. He does it his own way. He's pretty unflinching. And I'm sure he did a little bit of the Mark Pope thing, which is, when he was at Virginia, he was different than he was at BYU, just because you have to match the culture a little bit more of where you are. But Bronco is Bronco. He's pretty steadfast through and through.
I liked him, too. I think he had – this is weird to dive into something this deep when the show's ending, but I think Bronco created a character for BYU.
No question.
That was not him because – and it's not like I was going to dinners with the guy, but I interacted a little bit with him, in a not media way several times, and he was super normal. And then he'd put on this face and speaking of Janimal, talk to any of his ex-players, at least any that I've encountered, and they all say he's the coolest dude. They loved him. That he had a great personality and he was easy to be around and all these things that you wouldn't necessarily think if you just watched him coach or listened to his press conferences. I think when he got the job coming off of Croton, he got word like, hey, we expect certain things out of the head coach. And I think he created this identity that worked for him at BYU. But I don't think he wasn't like... I'm
sure that's not Bronco at home.
No, not at all.
No.
He's not... who's the old ball coach? What's his name? Why am I forgetting? Spurrier. When he was at South Carolina... He was amazing. He was just him. He was like up there doing a stand-up comedy routine. Like he could just be himself. He was above it all. It didn't matter. That was never Bronco. Bronco felt like I have to represent this because I'm the BYU football coach and this is my first head job and this is what's expected. And like I said, it worked for him, but I don't think it was like genuine. You know what Bronco really didn't like though? Were fans.
Correct.
And I don't think it was specifically BYU fans. I think it was just people like telling him what to do, like in his business. You know what I mean? Like when he snapped at the...
Not in the afternoon anymore. All those things that he had to deal with.
Anybody know something that I don't know?
Yeah, right.
But imagine how aggravating it'd be. You're doing a recruiting press conference, which is where that happened, and you just give out the measurements of a kid. Like you just say, he's 6'5" and 285. And some dweeb is like, actually, coach, he's listed at 2 whatever.
Yeah.
I'd wanna throw that person through a door too. Actually, coach.
Now I'm excited to see how New Mexico does. They will improve under Bronco because he does that everywhere he goes. Programs get better when Bronco's the head coach. Happened to Virginia, happened to BYU. It's going to happen in New Mexico.
Bronco would tell anecdotes about how he'd be surfing in Brazil or something, and people would come up to him because they, be with missionaries, BYU. I mean, it's, a worldwide religion or whatever. And I think that actually bugged him.
I think he wanted to be anonymous.
He could never get away. Like with UVA, listen, you could be surfing in wherever, and you're not getting any Wahoo fans coming up and saying hello. You can disappear if you're the UVA coach. In fact, quite easily at a basketball school, you could be like, nobody knows who I am.
I bet Witt can disappear when he wants to disappear. Witt's one of the maybe 5 best coaches on the planet right now at his job. Certainly top 10, and can probably disappear in a way Bronco never could.
Right.
Absolutely.
Bronco, I came to Tahiti
right
just for some peace. I go to get a snow cone.
Don't answer the door. Don't answer the door. I know they're knocking. Turn the lights off. I know we're supposed to let him in and feed him.
And it's a unique thing about BYU, but I don't think Bronco liked that part.
No, I think there's a lot of that lifestyle Bronco does not like.
No.
And that's what I liked about him. You're right. He created a facade and a personality that probably wasn't authentic. I liked that he was pretty unabashed in not liking a lot of the things, and it was obvious. I liked that about him. I thought it was funny.
Well, he's not an actor. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So he could put on the facade, but it wasn't.
Yeah, especially with how many actors there are in that line of work.
He's not De Niro, so, the real feeling slipped out every once in a while.
Well, he's not a car salesman, and so many of them are car salesmen.
But he was what BYU needed in this sense, and I think actually Kalani learned this early in his run at BYU. But because of the uniqueness of the university, you've got to have, a disciplined team that knows what to expect, that has high standards, because that's how you've got to operate to win at BYU. I don't know what a player's coach is, but your stereotypical player's coach is probably not necessarily going to win at BYU.
You just can't have any weak links.
Well, you're never going to be the most athletic team on the field.
Well, and if you have a weak link in the coaching staff that guys feel like they can get away with stuff, they will get away with stuff, and then you have to answer for it.
Right.
So you can't have that.
And you can't have chaos at BYU.
Nope, you can't. Anyways.
And Bronco was not chaotic. That's one of his strengths. He is not chaotic.
He's boring.
Boring.
To a strength, not to a fault.
I came over here to Kazakhstan just to get some peace and quiet.
This is a remote island.
Some guy with a Y on his shirt is just wandering up to me. Hey, coach!
I'm just going to swim out to the ocean, and I'm not going to come back, honey.
Yeah, it's Scotty G here. Coming up next. Stay tuned.
Thanks, Christian. Good week.
97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.